During the 1540-1542 Mixtón War, Francisco Tenamaztle, also known as Tenamaxtlan, Tenamaxtli, or Tenamaxtle, led the Caxcan Indigenous peoples in Mexico. Later, he was tried in Spain. He appealed to King Carlos I to defend the justice of his cause, with the help of Bartolomé de las Casas. The Caxcan and other indigenous peoples of northwest Mexico first came into contact with the Spanish in 1529, when Nuño Beltrán de Guzmán marched through the future states of Nayarit, Jalisco, Durango, Sinaloa, and Zacatecas from Mexico City, with 300-400 Spaniards and 5,000 to 8,000 Aztec and Tlaxcaltec allies. Guzmán carried out numerous brutal slave raids across northern Mexico over 6 years, enslaving thousands of indigenous people. In the area known as Nueva Galicia, Guzmán and his lieutenants established towns and Spanish settlements, including Guadalajara, whose first temporary location was at Nochistlan, Tenamastle's house in Zacatecas. As they attempted to use the encomienda system to compel Indians into slavery and drew farther away from the intricate hierarchical societies of central Mexico, the Spaniards faced more opposition. Sometime after Guzmán's expedition, Tenamaxtle received a Catholic baptism and was given the Christian name Francisco. He became the Lord Tlatoani of Nochistlan, a region and urban center in Zacatecas' southern region. The Spanish and Aztecs used the term Chichimeca to refer to all of the nomadic and semi-nomadic Native Americans who lived in the northern Mexican deserts, and the Caxcan Indians are frequently included in this group. However, the Caxcanes appear sedentary, living in permanent towns and settlements and relying on agriculture for their livelihood. They were arguably the most northern of the peoples of interior Mexico who lived in towns and cities and were farmers. Tenamaxtle was confirmed in his position and any property he owned, and he presumably took an oath of loyalty to the Spanish crown at the same time as his baptism. However, the oppressive nature of Spanish rule led to a revolt by the Caxcanes and their allies, the Zacatecos and possibly other Chichimeca tribes, in the middle of 1540. Tenamaxtle was the most notable leader from the Caxcanes' unclear command structure. It appears that the arrest of 18 rebellious Indian leaders and the hanging of 9 of them in the middle of 1540 catalyzed the Mixtón War. The encomendero Juan de Arce was killed by the Indians later that year. Additionally, Spanish authorities learned that the Indians were engaging in devilish dances. Many Indians escaped the encomiendas and sought safety in the mountains, particularly on the hill fortress of Mixtón, after 2 Catholic priests were killed. A Spanish and Indian force, led by acting governor Cristobal de Oñate, put an end to the uprising. A peace delegation consisting of 10 Spanish soldiers and 1 priest was killed by the Cascades. The Indians on the summit repulsed Oñate's attempt to storm Mixtón. Oñate then asked Mexico City, the capital, for reinforcements. Pedro de Alvarado, a seasoned conquistador, was called upon by Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza to help quell the uprising. Alvarado, accompanied by 400 Spaniards and an unspecified number of Indian allies, attacked Mixtón in June 1541 instead of waiting for reinforcements. There, Tenamaxtle and Don Diego, a Zacateco, led an Indian army that the Spanish estimated to be 15,000 strong. 10 Spanish and numerous Indian allies were killed in the initial Spanish attack, which was repulsed. Alvarado made more unsuccessful attempts, and on June 24th he was crushed when a horse fell on him. On July 4th, he passed away. Tenamaxtle's emboldened Indians launched an unsuccessful September attack on Guadalajara. The Indian army withdrew to strongholds like Nochistlan. At this point, the Spanish government was extremely concerned and worried that the uprising would spread. Under Viceroy Mendoza, they gathered a force of 450 Spaniards and between 30,000 and 60,000 Aztecs, Tlaxcalan, and other Indians, and they invaded the Caxcan's homeland. In a war of no quarter, Mendoza destroyed the Indian strongholds one by one with his overwhelming force. He took Tenamaxtle and Nochistlan on November 9, 1541, but the Indian leaders subsequently managed to get away. The rebellion came to an end when the Spaniards captured Mixtón in early 1542. Following the Caxcans' defeat, many of the survivors, mostly women and children, were taken from their homelands to work on Spanish farms and haciendas, and thousands were dragged off in chains to the mines. Men, women, and children were taken by the viceroy's order and put to death. Some were stabbed, some were torn apart by dogs, and some were killed by cannon fire. The Council of the Indies conducted a covert investigation into the viceroy's actions in response to reports of excessive violence against Indian civilians. Following the defeat, Tenamaxtle, Guaxikar, another leader, and their supporters withdrew into the Nayarit Mountains, where they spent 9 years in hiding. The last stronghold of Indian resistance to Spanish rule in Nueva Galicia, this region, which was mainly inhabited by the Cora people, was not fully ruled by the Spanish until 1722. Tenamaxtle willingly turned himself in to the Bishop of Nueva Galicia in 1551, and he was taken to Mexico City. His identity as the Caxcan's leader in the Mixtón War was confirmed by Spanish authorities on August 12, 1552, following an investigation. On November 17th, he was ordered to be sent to Spain for trial. Tenamaxtle lived in a Dominican monastery after being imprisoned in Valladolid, Spain. Bartolomé de las Casas, whom he met here, assisted him in arguing his position. The legal process moved slowly, and he didn't get a chance to argue his case before the king and the Council of the Indies until July 1, 1555. Tenamaxtle planned to declare that the War of the Caxcans was natural justice due to the abuses committed by the Spaniards, accused Nuño de Guzman, Cristobal de Oñate, and Miguel de Ibarra of exploiting and killing Indians, and prove that he was the legitimate Tlatoani of Nochistlan. He also showed that the Caxcan had received the Spanish in peace and should have all the rights of a vassal of the King of Spain. He asked for the return of his wife, children, and lands. Tenamaxtle stated that the Indians' goal was to flee the inhuman cruelty to which they were subjected, rather than rebel, and he urged the king to take into account the unparalleled wrongs and evils that the Caxcans had endured at the hands of the Spanish. For over a year, the trial went on without a verdict. The trial's final known document dates to August 7, 1556. Regarding Tenamaxtle and the case's outcome, nothing more is known. Most likely, he passed away in Spain.